Welcome to our resume review clinic of 2022. So before we get started, I just want to run through the flow of events. So of course, we're going to do welcome introductions and speakers. Then we're going to go into our resume building presentation from 5:05 to approximately 5:20. Then we would transition to breakout rooms and give some Zoom etiquettes, rules and regulations there. Then we're going to do personalized resume review for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to come back to the main room for closing remarks. So just to focus on Zoom etiquette, if you all can stay on mute while the presenter is presenting, that would be great. Scholars and members, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat box and/or use the raise hand feature. At the end, when we begin transitioning you to breakout rooms, you don't have to push anything with the exception of move to breakout room. If you see it at the bottom of your screen, please make sure you do not click leave breakout room at any time throughout this session. Scholars, we do ask you to turn your cameras on for the duration of the event. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker of the evening, which is Raj. Raj is the Hiring Impact Manager at Accenture Federal Services. In her current role, she is responsible for Accenture's National Impact Hiring Programs, to include the Skills to Succeed internship program, along with the Learning to Lead high school internship program. Raj joined Accenture in October of 2018, and she's been in her current role for 2 consecutive years. She graduated from the University of Austin, Texas, earning a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. So welcome, Raj. We're excited to have you join us today.
All right, Devonia, thank you for your introduction. Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to see all of you. And you might be wondering, how can Raj talk about, let me stop sharing. Let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. There we go. Is this the right screen? Do you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Or no?
Yes, we can see it, Raj.
Okay, perfect. You guys might be wondering, does Raj have any authority to talk about resumes? And yes, so I graduated in 2018, but I was involved in a lot of leadership activities outside, like while I was in college. And then once I got to Accenture, I have been mostly involved in a lot of recruiting activities and really involved as the Impact Hiring Program Manager. I see a ton of resumes come across my email almost like every single week and every single day. So I've seen a lot of resumes and I kind of have an idea of what works and what doesn't, but that's all to say that resumes are a reflection of you and your experience. So this is kind of my advice to you. And so try to kind of imagine what your resume would look like in accordance with this advice. But, you know, there's a lot of different advice out there on what makes a great resume, but this is just some of the core principles that I wanted to share with you. But the first thing that I wanted to do was to show you my journey line. This is a tool that we use at Accenture often, and it's basically something to capture your story. And the reason why I wanted to show this to you guys is because it's a really, it's a great kind of activity to do no matter where you are in your career, just to kind of give you a picture of like how far you've come, what have been the highs, what have been the lows. And through this activity, you'll be able to capture some kind of key moments in your own life, in your own kind of experience and journey so far that can then be translated over to your resume, right? So for example, one of my low points was actually my very last work experience before my very last internship before my senior year. I was an intern at Frito-Lay. Nothing against the company. It's a great company. I really enjoyed it, but the role that I was in was just not a great fit for me. And I really struggled during it. It was like an almost daily struggle through that internship. But on my resume, I was able to talk through the challenges and how I overcame them. And because I plotted this journey line, I was able to kind of reflect better on what that experience looked like for me. And then kind of going through my resume now has a lot of other kind of client experiences I've had, other projects I've been on. And those roles also are reflected in kind of like, what were the things I accomplished? What were the challenges I overcame? So it's really important to kind of look at your experience so far as a tool of like almost resilience. Like when you've been down, like how have you overcome those challenges? And your resume should reflect to a certain extent your ability to overcome obstacles. So with that, some key resume, not just a consulting resume, but like any resume. Right now, for all of you, you guys are, I believe, none of you have graduated college yet, and I don't believe any of you have over 5 years of work experience. Your resume should not be more than a page long. If you're giving your resume to a recruiter, on average, they're not going to look for it over a minute, right? So like your resume has to capture all of the things that you're trying to get across on just one page. And you need to make sure that it's really clean and organized. All of us have really great personalities. I think, you know, we want that to be reflected in our resume, but colors are not always your friend. So like any kind of graphic design or anything that you have on your resume, especially if you're looking for either an internship with a company like Accenture or one of a more corporate internship or a full-time hiring experience, you would want to keep your resume kind of really easy to read, nothing to distract them from the content that's on the page. The most important thing to get across on your resume is what you've written down, right? So you don't want them to look away from that at all. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that you're going to put in a lot of time likely to format your resume exactly with the margins you need at the exact font you want it at to fit everything into that one page. And if you send it as a Word document and they open it up, and some people will open up your resume in Word, like Word 2008, right? Like it has been years maybe since they've updated their Microsoft Office tools, and it's probably going to come across in a completely different format than the one that you sent it in. So it's very important that once you've formatted your resume, check across, make sure that it's, make sure it's grammatically correct, make sure you don't have any spelling mistakes, and then put it in a PDF so that their computer, whatever Word version, or if they're using Google Docs or whatever they're using to open up your document, doesn't mess up all the work that you've put in to format it accurately. So now we can move on to resume content. So I think it's important to understand that like there are some really, you want to avoid using words in your resume that don't capture the reviewer's interest or doesn't capture the reviewer's kind of like eye, right? So if you want to avoid words like made, did, worked on, because it's more than that, right? Like if you made a document, you've probably done extensive research to create that document. You want to reflect the work you've done, right? Don't diminish the work you've put into something. So if, for example, you created training materials for users, a better way to say that would be creating training and support materials to provide users with guidance on systematic updates based on quarterly enhancements, right? Like just beef up your examples a little bit more, make them more specific to the work that you did, and also include an impact, right? So make sure, if you guys have heard of the STAR methodology, which is the interview methodology we recommend often to our candidates, it's situation, task, action, result. In your resume, the result of every action you take should be reflected. Like, what is the impact that you made? And so to help with that, if you guys want, and I'll actually make sure this deck is sent to you guys, but these are some words that you can use to kind of, it's almost like a thesaurus for the words that you could use to make your resume look just a little more kind of robust, right? So if you were thinking about, this is active verbs by skill. So for example, if the skills that you're trying to get across are administrative, the kind of words that you should be using are standardized, operated, monitored. right? If the role that you're looking for example, for those of you who are still in school and you're looking to get a mentorship role, if you've had a previous mentorship role, you want to use words like motivated, mediated, guided, right? So these are kind of words to kind of get across the full work that you've done in previous roles. All right. So like I mentioned, a big part of your resume is reflecting the impact that you've made in roles. A big part of this is figuring out what the quantitative metrics are for the impact that you've made. An example of this, for those of you who are maybe in a student org, a lot of you are probably in a lot of leadership positions outside of the academic work you've done. For example, if you're a membership lead at a student org, and you've increased membership, then include the metric by which you increase membership for your org by. Like, I'm the recruiting lead for my org and I organize, X number of events. So I organized 20 events and I increased membership by over 40% for this organization. So the metrics kind of help show kind of the impact of the work you've done and maybe even the effectiveness of the work that you've done. And kind of critical here is to also make sure in your, when you're describing certain activities, to include accomplishments, not just tasks completed, right? Like if in a role, there's something that you're really proud of for completing, then make sure that accomplishment is reflected in your resume, right? So I guess another example that we can think of is if you were in a job or you were in an internship and the accomplishment that you had was you were let's say you were, if it was like a competition or a case competition or something like that, you participated and you won first place, then that's something you can mention, right? What's something the big things, the gold stars that you got, make sure that those are kind of noted on your resume as well. And to look at these verbs that we looked at on the other slide in terms of outcomes, these are some of the words that you can use. So if you oversaw something, then you can talk about delegating, monitoring, verifying. If you achieved something, attained, awarded, completed, demonstrated. So these are some of the words that you can use, and try to make sure that you don't use the same words multiple times, right? So if I see the word collaborated on 4 different experiences you've had, collaborated is an excellent word, but there are different ways to say that too, right? So it shouldn't seem too repetitive, right? Especially for someone who's just taking a quick scan of your resume. All right, so the other thing that we'll mention is to also include skills. So if you are incredibly there are different levels of an expert in a skill, but for example, if you're a really accomplished PowerPoint maker, right, you could put an expert in PowerPoint. If you have a very good understanding of Excel, right, this would be if you understand how to do VLOOKUP, if you have a little bit of experience with VBA, which is kind of the coding language behind Excel, you could say you're experienced or an expert in Excel. This is kind of really important when it comes to languages. A lot of people like to include languages. I've never been called on this, but if you were to put, expert in Spanish and your interviewer happens to speak Spanish and they start talking to you in Spanish, and let's just say you're not an expert and you're actually a beginner, that's not something you want to get called out on. So just kind of make sure that your experience and your skill in something is accurately reflected in your resume, because you never know exactly how proficient your interviewer might be in that same skill. All right, the other thing so kind of back to formatting, I would highly encourage all of you to keep the same font across your entire resume. You can bold about. So it's just about how easily can the person reading the resume consume the information? Can they do it as quickly as possible? So as you guys are kind of writing out your resume, make sure the dates are all aligned. Make sure that, if you're using seasons, then you use seasons for everything. If you're using months, you use months for everything. And just try to make sure it's as uniform as possible so that it's really all about making sure that no one reviewing your resume gets distracted from anything, right? Like they're just focused on content. They're not thinking, oh, this person misspelled this really common word, or they're not thinking, oh, this word doesn't make a lot of sense in this context, right? So they should never get distracted from exactly what you're trying to convey, and your format should help that process, not hinder that process. All right, so we're going to go into just a couple of really quick examples. So I'm actually going to skip this one and go into this one because this is kind of more where you guys are, right? So when you're talking about resumes, there's a couple of things already wrong with this example. So do you guys, if anyone's in the audience, do you want to tell me what you kind of see is already wrong with this example?
The font size. Oh, I don't know if we're supposed to talk. Like actually, can we come on the mic and just say it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. The font size looks different.
Yeah, it is, right? Between the top two examples and the bottom three bullets, the font size is off. Anything else?
It also doesn't give a timeline.
Yeah, there's no time on this example either. So
did this happen over the course of 4 years, or did this happen over the course of a couple of months? Anything else?
I would say probably the grammar, like why is there an S after one sentence, but then others there's not. The photo as well.
yeah, the photo, that's more of a PowerPoint thing. It wouldn't be on the resume, right? But
Okay.
agreed, right? So you want to make sure that for every single kind of example that you're using, that you're in the same, like you're using the same like
Tense, right? So if this is something you've already done, then it should be in past tense. If it's something that you're currently doing, it should be in present tense. I wouldn't include anything that you're doing in the future. So there really shouldn't be anything on your resume that's like future tense. If like, even if it's like impact you're expecting to happen, I wouldn't be like, will increase to 40% or whatever. That's not something that should necessarily be there yet. But yeah, that's a really good, those are some really good call outs, right? So even in kind of like a resume example, there's a lot of things that can still be improved. I will say that I haven't updated my resume since I got my job 3 years ago, but yes, but in a good resume, you want to make sure that, for example, like you don't see like repetition happening in your resume, right? And then the other example that I had was on work experience. So the words that this was my internship, like my very last internship before I graduated. And so the words that I used were standardized, implemented, collaborated, created. Created might be maybe of the words that I used, possibly the most kind of overused and common. But yeah, so those are some examples, and I think we're already like 3 minutes over. So I'm just going to stop here and pause for questions. Any kind of questions on like overall resume etiquette or anything like that?
How many bullet points do you think would be best after work experiences?
So it really depends on you and how many bullet points it takes to get that experience across, right? I would say I would anywhere between like 3 and 5 is a good number of bullet points on a robust work experience. If you have enough to talk about, then you can take it pretty far. But I wouldn't go over. Like in a resume, the person viewing it doesn't need to know every minute detail, right? They just need to know like they just need to know almost a summary. So
Raj, this is Steve Stanton. One of the things I've read about a lot lately is machines, computers reviewing resumes before a human looks at them and sifting through. And it seems like that's done based on keywords or that are either good or bad. What advice do you have for the students to, avoid having their resumes sifted out by computers?
Yeah, so I would take a really good look at the job description, right? So usually in a requisition or like when you're applying to a specific job through a portal, they'll write like what they're looking for, like what qualities they're looking for in a candidate. And
I'm not saying you should you should adapt your resume to every job opportunity, but actually that's exactly what I'm saying. So every resume you turn in, like there's one standard resume that you have and a set of experiences you're talking about. But if you are applying to roles kind of across the spectrum, and they're not all about being a business analyst, or they're not all about going into IT or security, if you're applying across the board, then your resume should change for every opportunity type you're applying to. And what they say in their job description, you should basically be looking at the job description almost as an interview, and your resume should be answering the questions they're asking within that job rec, basically.
And Raj, another question. How about the use of cover letters when you're submitting resumes? Is that something that you should do? Is really phased out these days?
I think it's pretty phased out these days. So I'll say this is a very Accenture specific example in that we do not look at the cover letters that are submitted to us. In general, that's not something we take into consideration. It really depends on where you're applying, right? So at larger companies, like the cover letter may not make that big of a difference because of just the sheer volume of stuff they're getting. They might not have time to also look at a cover letter. On the other hand, if you're applying to some like more smaller companies, if you're applying to a job that's more graphic design related, or at like a more smaller firm, the hiring process is more intimate and the cover letter does make a difference.
Raj, this is another Raj here, Raj Patel.
Hey, Raj.
General question, two questions. One, references. Do you put references in the resume, or do you just mention references available on request? That's the first question. And the second question is, I've seen lately in the technical applications hyperlinks of publications or papers that peer-reviewed journals that you publish, things like that. So any comments on that would help the scholars, please. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So for the second aspect of this, the technical resume, back to what Steve mentioned on his question about I don't know, like resumes getting tossed out basically by a machine or whatever. It's similar to that, right? You should have a really good understanding of what you're applying for. If you're applying to a more technical role that requires more technical expertise, then you should have, you should basically have a portfolio that people can refer to. So I have seen resumes for, I guess, more technical roles that take people out to almost like a GitHub type project that people have created. And that does help to show like you have experience in what you're talking about. And it's almost like immediate proof of like work that you've done. And it makes sense specifically for like more technical roles. So you have to have a really good understanding of like the industry that you're applying into to see whether or not that's the norm. And then in terms of references, again, this kind of really depends on like what you're applying through. I've personally, the way I've given references in the past is that it's like the resume is submitted, and then in addition, they'll ask for references in a different part of the application. And that's usually where I provide references. I usually don't have references within my resume, nor have I seen references on a lot of resumes. So I think it really depends on, again, industry and what the norm is within the industry. But
obviously if they ask for references, be ready to provide them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You
Thank you,
asked,
Raj.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Any other questions?
All right, I don't hear any more questions, but thank you so much, Raj, for your amazing presentation. It was very helpful for myself, and I'm sure it was helpful for the scholars and members here. We will go into breakout rooms momentarily, but before we do that, I am going to ask everyone if we can just take a few photos before we do that. So scholars, if you don't have your camera on, can you please turn your camera on so we can take a quick screenshot? Welcome back, everyone. Just want to give it a few more seconds to make sure we have all of the groups back here in the main room. All right, so I believe we have everyone. Thank you so much for participating in that personalized resume review session. I hope that it was beneficial for you. We hope that the presentation was great and that you learned something from it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can go over some announcements. All right, so following this event tomorrow, you will receive a notification, an email through CVent the same way you got the link to join today. And it's just going to be a reminder email about the upcoming mock interview and also a follow-up. We want you all to complete, we ask that you all will complete the survey. Let us know how we did. Let us know if it was good. We want to know if it was bad. We want to know your raw opinions because it helps us improve programming. In addition to that, you will receive a contact list. So scholars, please follow up with the members and guests who were in your group. Thank them for their services today. If you happen to update your resume and you want them to review it again, feel free to ask them for that. If you need any support in what type of language to use or anything else from the Economic Club, feel free to send us an email. We're happy to support you. So next week on Tuesday, we do have mock interviews. We have a lot of people lined up, a lot of members excited to meet you all. So please join us for that. It's a great program. And now that you have your resumes reviewed, you are one step closer to securing your job. From that next session, we'll have industry cluster informational happening on March 21st. But I will ask that you all follow us on social media and we'll keep you posted on the dates and the different types of programs that we have. And I am going to stop sharing my screen now because that is all I have on there. But there was one more announcement that I wanted to make so you all are aware. On our website, if you click a blue button, it says Scholar Reference. Every month, we update it with scholarship opportunities, internship opportunities, and employment opportunities. So scholars, please take advantage of those resources. And I've had a few of you all ask me about the Economic Club Urban Alliance internship program. And that is for current juniors, seniors, and recent graduates. So that'll be 2022 college graduates. So if you do not fit that category, but you're still looking for internship opportunities, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to support you in finding that. But also be mindful that SYEP is an option, which is the Summer Youth Employment Program here in Washington, D.C. So if you need any type of support, feel free to reach out to us at the Economic Club, but we wish you all well. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, members. Thank you, guests. This was a great program. And without further ado, I'm going to let you all go unless anyone has any additional questions. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you.